The most terrifying moments in JRE history. Part 1. The Twilight Zone before death.
We were talking before, there's so much to talk about, but we were talking before, and you were saying that over the last year, you almost died because you had some crazy internal, you had an aneurysm in your pancreas? Is that what you said it was?
Yeah, I had an undiagnosed asymptomatic aneurysm, which is a sort of ballooning in the blood vessel, in the artery, in my pancreatic artery. And out of the blue, it was a congenital thing. Like I apparently had developed during my whole life. It was just from a structural problem. And one beautiful June afternoon last year, it burst. And I just felt this pain shoot through my stomach. I was like, damn, what is that? And within a few minutes, I couldn't stand up. And within about 10 minutes, I was starting to go blind. And my wife called the ambulance, and those guys got there, and I was tanking really fast. And the hospital is an hour away. And by a miracle, I don't even think the doctors understand it, but by a miracle, I was still alive when I got to the hospital. I lost 90% of my blood into my abdomen. I didn't know I was dying, but I was dying, and I was right in that sort of twilight zone. And a black pit opened up underneath me, and I felt myself starting to get pulled down into it, and I didn't want to go. Like, it was cold and dark and black and bottomless, and I just knew, like, do not go down there. I was getting pulled down into it, and right at that moment, my father, who passed away in 2012, my father sort of appeared next to me and started trying to communicate with me and comforting me. And I sort of waved him away, and the last thing I remember saying to the doctor, I was sort of losing consciousness, and the last thing I said to the doctor was, "You're losing me right now, you gotta hurry." He was trying to he'd cut my neck open, he was trying to put a line into my neck to, they pumped 10 units of blood into me, and that's what brought me back. It was really close.
Wow.
Next, we take a look at Part 2. The death of the father.
He was murdered in May of 1999. He had answered a personals ad for a woman who was looking for a boyfriend, and the ad was headlined Kismet. I believe that's the Arab word for fate. And Dad met with her. Her name was Rita. She was a lawyer. She had worked in the prison system in the Midwest. And Dad was really, really taken with her. She was really bright and really smart. And she had an ex-husband who had sexually abused her daughter from a different marriage. And they were pressing charges against this ex-husband, and he was going to go to prison. And she had met him while he was in prison, and she was doing legal work. And she had helped him get out of prison. So she helped him get out of prison. She'd married him. He had abused her daughter. She divorced him. She was prosecuting him to send him back to prison. Then she met my father. And this ex-husband had said that if he ever caught her with another man, he would kill them both. So my father was going to pick her up, and she was going to stay at his house in the mountains until the time of the trial. And as he was going to pick her up, he was going down this mountain road on his property, and a giant boulder broke free, and it rolled down the hillside, and it blocked the road. He couldn't get out. So he spent the day with this a lever, forcing this boulder off the road. And then he took a couple extra hours, and he made a sign that said Kismet Rock, so that he could label this boulder as a kind of landmark for when he brought her back to sequester her. And he'd cleaned the house incredibly. The house was just neat as a pin and stocked with all this food. And, he really planned to have this fantastically sort of idyllic time sequestered with his new girlfriend. And he labeled the rock to surprise her. And then he went to pick her up. And when he went to pick her up, the ex-husband showed up. And he shot my father. And my father and the woman took refuge in her house, and the man set fire to the house. And the house eventually collapsed, And the coroner says that they were both dead before the fire got to them. And the coroner says that because of the angle of the shot, my father probably took about 20 minutes to die because the bullet ruptured his diaphragm. So with every breath, he would have been accumulating air between the lung and the diaphragm. And so every breath would have been more and more shallow because his lungs would have been more and more constricted by this air above the diaphragm. But that eventually he'd suffocated. And all of this sounds horrible and tragic, but it forms this fantastic pattern in my father's life because my father, when he was very small, he lived in northern Idaho with this enormous Ukrainian family. And his father went crazy one day. This is all public record. I've talked about this a lot. But his father took a rifle and walked around the house and tried to kill him, my father, and ultimately killed killed his wife, my father's mother, and then killed himself. But my father's earliest memories are of hiding underneath a bed as his father walked around the house in logging boots with a rifle, calling his name, trying to get him to come out so that he could be killed.
Jesus Christ.
And so my father spent his entire life sort of looking for his mother because as his father was trying to kill him, he was trying to find his mother, who at that point had been killed. And so my father really had this kind of serial pattern with women. He was always looking, in a way, for the woman. And ultimately, he was shot by the man with a gun in the way that he would have been shot when he was 4 years old. And one of the uncanny things is that their bodies were only preserved because a bed on the second floor of this structure, as it was burning, the bed fell over their bodies and insulated their bodies. And my father had escaped his father by hiding underneath a bed when he was a small child. And the fact that the Lonely Hearts ad was headlined Kismet, and the fact that this boulder rolled down in front of my father's car just as he was leaving,
that prevented him from getting there in time, where he probably would have been able to escape before the ex-boyfriend arrived.
Or I don't know, there's so many odd, bizarre coincidences and synchronicities. You know, you would have to really dismiss a lot of things in order to make this not something significant.
Not fate, or not some reoccurring theme woven into time.
And in a way that, understanding all these different aspects of it, it provides a comfort that it doesn't seem like this random thing. It seems like something that some aspect of my father's life that was coming full circle and was finally being completed. And maybe I am clutching at straws and I'm just a kind of person looking for significance.
And for the final segment, part 3, Joe Rogan's experience with sexual assault.
Dodged 2 molestation attempts.
Really?
Yeah, 2.
What'd you dodge?
Well, I dodged one of them when I probably was like 7 or 8 years old. That was the scary. Well, they were both pretty scary, but that was the scarier one because I was at the library and I was by myself. I was a latchkey kid. My parents just let me out of the house, which, at the time was kind of normal. In retrospect, like thinking about it now, like I couldn't imagine letting my 7-year-old just fucking
library.
wander around. Not just that, but walk to the public library, in San Francisco. And this guy, I was looking at, I was always into like horror movies and monster movies and shit.
Yeah.
And so I was reading these books they had a section of like, monster books.
Yeah.
And this guy came up to me and he goes, do you like monster books? I go, yeah. And he goes, oh, I have some monster books in my car. You want to see them? I'm
No.
like, okay. Like, I didn't know any better. I was fucking 8 years old or whatever it was. And as I'm leaving with this guy, the librarian starts screaming, Joseph, you get away from that man. That man just got out of jail. And she yells at him to get out of there, and the guy runs away, and I just started crying, and I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
So I dodged that bullet.
Thank you to all who watched the end of the video. Please like and subscribe. I'm just a new channel trying to grow.